Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Hump Day Hangout focused on fire training. It is the first Wednesday of the month, so I'm here, your host, Steve Pegram from the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Here as well, a guest, Brad French from Dayton Fire in Dayton, Ohio, and also ISFSI. Bobby Halton from FDIC in Penwell, Fire Engineering, and I believe Bill Carey is there as well, who is now helping produce these weekly Hump Day Hangouts here, Google Hangouts. So without further ado, Chief, and what's going on with FDIC, Penwell, Fire Engineering, etc. Bobby?
Well, thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everybody. Real quick, little commercial announcements. This Saturday, October the 10th, at Citi Field, it'll be the very first national stair climb, sponsored by the NFFF as well as the FDNY. So please, if you can make it down there, we're hoping to get about 1,500 climbers. Should be a great day. Mets are not in the playoffs, so it's definitely on. If you're a Met fan, sorry. If you're a Yankee fan, God bless you. But so that's still on. Please, if you can make it down there, that'd be great. If you can't, there's a virtual climb. Go to the NFF's website and please support the first national stair climb. It would mean a ton to the families of all the fallen, and we promise never to forget. So let's never forget. November the 7th. Is the gala for the Firefighter Cancer Support Network. That'll be out in LA. You can go to the Firefighter Cancer Support Network's website and see all the great stuff they're doing. And then finally, our good friends at Sons of the Flag are having their annual film festival, and that starts on Friday, November the 13th, with an incredible luncheon with General Tommy Franks. So if you wanted to go meet the good general and listen to him speak and join our friends at Sons of the Flag, who do great work in getting burn care for firefighters and military who've been burnt, as well as civilians. It's an amazing foundation run by a former Navy SEAL named Ryan Parrott, and a pretty amazing group. FDIC is going great. We'll have everything up online pretty soon. Some amazing classes, just a boatload of new stuff in the hands-on training, as well as in the classroom and workshops, including the Instructor Society will be back with their Train the Trainer program. So that's going to be very cool. Please keep an eye on the website. And if you're looking to get downtown, register now and get your hotel room now. You know, lots of folks call me up in February and March, and they say, I can't get a hotel downtown. It's kind of a popular conference, and it sells out the downtown area. So if you could please, register early, get your hotel early, and make sure you're downtown for all the action. But the shuttles are great. They're excellent shuttles, and occasionally I'll ride one just to visit with everybody, and so I know they work real well. Some really cool news. We've got a new producer, and he's on with us today. His name's Bill Carey. He's been running the Firefighter Nation site for years, as well as Law Officer and GEMS. He's an amazing online editor, amazing firefighter, deeply embedded with the NFFF. He's got a long and storied career, family history in the fire service, tremendous insight, writes a wonderful blog on Fire EMS blogs. If you go to the blog site we have at Firefighter Nation. So it's really cool to bring Bill in. So he'll kind of serve as our default ombudsman to let us know if we're drifting off track and add his opinion from time to time. And he'll be on all the shows. So it's wonderful to have him. He's a great guy, and I know it's really going to take this to a whole new level. So thank you so much for agreeing to do that, Bill, and welcome. And today's going to be a very interesting show. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this document that the and the other thing, this show is now going to be called the Instructor Show. It's owned and operated by the International Association of Fire Service Instructors. I never get that right. The International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Yeah, forget it. The instructors. I'm old. It's a tongue twister. Sorry, Steve.
It's all right.
It's their show, so we're just going to call it the Instructor Show going forward, and we're really looking forward to it. And we got Billy Guston calling in, so I'll take this with Bill Guston, and Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Bobby. And like you said, we're all looking forward to FDIC 2016. I'll throw out real quick the instructor
I'm on a
conference coming up here in just 2 weeks. There's still time to register. Our pre-conference workshops are already sold out, so that opportunity is gone. But there's still seats available for the actual conference, which is in Knoxville, Tennessee, October 16th and 17th at ISF. As always, if you have questions or would like to join the conversation today, hashtag FETalk on Twitter, and we'll try to get your questions on here or questions answered. And without that, we'll go right into our topic today, and Brad and Aaron and Bill may join in and from their different perspectives. What we're going to talk about is training, compliant with the laws and regulations, but also from a company officer perspective, when you have downtime, when you have free time with your company, how do you prioritize what you're going to drill on? And so Aaron and Brad, especially both being engine company officers, are going to chime in on that. But where I'll start is the International Society of Fire Service Instructors has a document that was actually created by a bunch of guys, Indiana Fire at the state of Indiana has shared it with ISFSI. Originally worked on a lot by Al Schlick and Chad Abel, who are both past FDIC instructors and ISFSI members. And basically, it's an assessment guide for a training division to make sure you're in compliance with your local and state laws. So it covers things like what are the ISO requirements, what are etc. Operational safety, fireground operations, technical rescue, emergency vehicle operations, and incident management. And it breaks down the specifics wherever there's a shall in any of those laws or standards. It breaks down what the shall says you will do, and then it gives you the reference points of where to get more information to the department. Is looks a little like this, and it's available at isfsi.org, and I believe it's going to be attached to this session once we archive it and on Fire Engineering's website today. It's a PDF, about 38 pages. We wanted to make you aware of it so you can use it as a self-assessment guide. But as we kick into our topic, from a chief standpoint, and that's what I do in my daily life in Goshen, Ohio, is play fire chief. You know, a document like this allows me to ensure that we're compliant with the OSHA regulations. A lot of OSHA standards are adopted in our Ohio Revised Code, which is the state law we have to find. And I'm going to drop off for a second and come back because I believe we're having some technical difficulties. I'll be right back.
Wasn't that bad, Steve? Just a little choppy.
Okay. I finish my thought and then Aaron can chime in. But from a chief perspective, you know, this guide helps me make sure we're hitting the benchmarks that I have to hit, basically to keep us from getting sued, to make sure that my firefighters are getting the required training they need to have to keep us out of litigation and things like that. But as we all know, there's a lot of other training that we need to do and isn't necessarily mandatory training. It's the stuff that we need to do, bread and butter operations, maybe technical rescue, certain tools and equipment we carry. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit more with our my co-host here. Sir, once you or the training officer is going to send down to you what's required and what you have to get done, and we got to check those boxes and make sure we do those things annually or quarterly or whatever the requirement is. But now you've got a free afternoon and you want to do some training. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon in Hamilton Township, New Jersey. What's Aaron Heller going to do with his company, and how does he decide what he's going to do?
Well, that's exactly why we're here, and it's funny you say that because this morning, coming back from a run, I told the guys, hey, I'm going to be on this Google Hangout from 1 to 2 if we're not too busy. Hopefully I can stay on. But when we're done with it, we're going to go out and stretch some line. So we're going to be doing some yard stretches, some tenement stretches, trying to get out there and do something that the guys need to freshen up on. But it's a big question. It's a real big question because we have so many requirements already set forth, you know, as far as the OSHA training and the CPR research and our EMS training and so forth. A lot of training officers have that question: where am I at? What am I supposed to be doing next? So I guess one question that I've had for other training officers has been, you know, how are you prioritizing? And one thing I do with my guys annually is I send out an email and basically a form, asking them what training they feel that we've been missing, or what training they feel we need to really get deeper into. What are we seeing on calls? Are we seeing that we need some remediation in some areas? So that's where I start developing what I'm going to do. But on my own shift, my guys know that we're going to drill a lot when we can, and they come to me with it. You know, we have that open communication where one of my guys will say, hey, I need to do some hydronops today. Great, we're going to get out and do it, you know, so long as our schedule permits. But prioritizing it, I try to prioritize starting with, I got to do these things. I have to do my the stuff that I know is checking the mark, checking the box off to protect the chief and the job, and make sure the guys keep their qualifications up. But once I do that, that is the requirements. It's not necessarily what I like to do. Then it's get in the street and you know, start stretching line and start throwing ladders and doing extrication work from there on.
Brad, what do you do in the city of Dayton, Ohio?
All right, just making sure my microphone was unmuted there. You know, I think training at the company level, to me, is very driven by your first due district. You know, you obviously need to be a well-rounded firefighter and be familiar with anything you could be presented with. But I think it's driven by your first due district. If you're in a downtown district with a lot of high-rise buildings and things like that, one of the things we like to do in my first due, I kind of jokingly refer to it with the guys as training by walking around, just parking the engine and getting out and walking around at buildings and looking at FDCs and you know, walking in and checking out standpipe connections in the stairwell and elevator operations and things like that. Just parking the engine and getting out and walking around. And again, depending upon your first due district, you might have a bunch of complex stretches in your first due. And so you're going to focus training on that, and just like Aaron just said, get out, stretch some lines. Don't be afraid of hose. Don't be afraid of ladders. Get out and do it. And so, to me, it's very driven. My training at the company level is very driven by my first due district and the different options and opportunities we have to do training in the first due. Whether that's a downtown environment, whether that's a suburban environment, primarily residential, whatever, you're going to have different challenges, and you can kind of curtail your training program at the company level to you know, what kind of things you're going to see most often in your first due.
Awesome. I know all of us have a background. I mean, we're all currently working on the career side of the fire service, but all of us have a background at some time in the volunteer fire service. And I know Bill Carey, who's with us and listening in, I'd love to yank you into the conversation too, Bill. And what do you see, you know, where you've run as a volunteer, I know, in Maryland, how do we prioritize training in the volunteer, you know, because company officer in an urban or suburban city department, obviously there's time set out every day, but in the volunteer fire service, it's a little more complicated with time management and drill nights and stuff like that. Would you like to chime in on that a little bit, Bill?
Sure. At least in my experience, on the volunteer side, most of it revolved around a duty shift program, or even just the idea of there's a certain time period where we need to do a training of some subject either once a month or at least twice a month. And you know, it just in some ways it's a hodgepodge of just throwing subjects and seeing what sticks and seeing what attracts members, and in other ways it's more laid out, more detailed, with actually a schedule.
Aaron, when you were fire chiefing in South Jersey, dealing with the volunteer fire service, was it prioritizing different than what you do now?
You know what? It was a little bit different, Steve, simply because I had far less time. With this, I know my guys are locked in on shift. I've got a captive audience, but when I was a volunteer chief, I had really 2 to 3 drill nights a month that I was getting them, plus maybe a weekend here or there. So I had to prioritize a lot more, I feel, in the volunteer service than I did here, because I had less of an opportunity. My window was smaller.
Yeah, and I experienced the same thing, although I've been out of it longer than you have. You know, when we drilled as a volunteer department, we only we had 4 nights. Was dedicated to a meeting, and another one was dedicated to maintenance and cleaning the station and that sort of thing. So when you only have 2 drills a month, which equates to about 24 a year, you got to make sure you hit those bullet points, which is why a document like the one we're sharing today is great, because you can use that as your guide to make sure that you're hitting all those benchmarks and those requirements. But what we're seeing more and more, and I'm seeing in my job, is departments doing after action meetings, whether it's a critique, on the tailboard, next shift, based or things that we just feel we could have done a little bit better at. And I first learned this from when I was working with Chief Goldfeder in Ohio. After the fire, we would rate ourselves and go around, how do you feel we did after we did our critique? Was it an A performance or was it a C minus? And then areas could, and then of course that became the training priorities for the next week or two. So any experience from any of you in doing that?
If I could chime in, we used to do the tailboard reviews at every fire also. And what we found to be really valuable was the way we structured it was that we went in the order of arrival. And the rule was that you could talk about what you did, what in hindsight you might have done differently, what you discovered, what you would have liked to have known before that you now know, and that you couldn't critique or comment on anybody else's performance. And then we would go all the way around, everybody to have a chance to chime in, and that was really a valuable deal. And we didn't craft so much our upcoming training from that. It was kind of structured in advance, but I know that there were recommendations made to the training division in light of some of those fires, but not every fire, but sometimes the bigger events where something anomalous happened, and so we would see somebody say, oh, hey, we never saw this before, and they'd hook up with the training troops and punch that out. But yeah, I think that when you have a document like what the society has produced there, it's really important to look at the compliance for ISO or Texas State Training Commission or the Nebraska Fire Commission, whatever your state regulations are, as well as the ISO regulations. And then if you look at the NFPA standards, there's some recommended training in there too. The more things you can use to document your compliance with recommended standards and industry agreed upon levels, the better it is. Seriously, it just helps you craft your calendar for the year. And I think Steve makes a great point. You should leave some holes in that calendar to plug in these unusual events that prompt you to want to do some additional training on some aspect of the fireground.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. That I like that. We've done critiques for years, both formal and informal. But as we get more involved in it, and when we have a call that is challenging to say the least, they really do help. And it's a form of training. It's absolutely a form of training. On that, I guess one question that I would put out there is, you have to put out a formal training program. You have to put out, either monthly or bi-monthly or however we're giving out the assignments to the troops. Brad, is there a certain way that you guys do it in Dayton? That it comes down from above from the training division and then it goes to the troops. And how is that? How do you delineate what's going to happen then?
Yeah, a lot of the required trainings, the things that are going to be like the annual refreshers and things like that, we'll use a learning management system for some of that stuff. We just happen to use CenterLearn. There's obviously all kinds of different ones out there and available. And then once a year we'll come out for basic skills. Actually, our department's in the middle of doing basic skills for this year. We're doing high-rise operations at a downtown high-rise. But oftentimes we go out to the training center, and every company gets a day or so with a lot of face time with the training center staff to be able to accomplish whatever the theme for that year is. And so, some of the required training we do in person with the training center staff, but a lot of the more I hate to say mundane, but the less exciting required annual things we often take care of with CenterLearn and very and videos and things like that, and do some video-based training and web-based training. And then and again, just like what we're talking about today, at that point it's up to the company officers to fill in those gaps and to do the best they can at the company level to have their folks prepared for everything else that's not required under annual training, which obviously is a whole lot. And the company officers have that flexibility to curtail their training program to whatever works for them in-house. One of the things that we do, one of the things that I like to do with our guys on Sundays, and I actually had the opportunity to put something up on Fire Engineering Training Community about this earlier this year, is we use the paper, the Sunday paper, the real estate section from the Sunday paper, because you can have a bunch of houses that are, they're not theoretical houses, they're your houses in your first due district. You can look and, quiz your guys on, all right, let's look at the windows here. Where are the stairs? Does this have a basement? Does it not have a basement? What's the stretch going to be like here if we pull up and the fire's showing here? And so, utilizing some resources that maybe people don't immediately think about to give your guys some good in-house training.
That's a great idea. It
You know what?
really is.
And Brad, when you said that, I just had a goofy idea. Maybe it's not so goofy, I don't know. But what if fire companies, during some of these open houses that these real estate agents did, what if they took the opportunity to just walk through?
Absolutely.
Like everybody else does. And you get an idea of what some of the new construction looks like in some of the new neighborhoods, and you might have an opportunity to let the real estate agent know to check those smoke detectors before they sell the house. That's probably something they should, change out. Detectors last about 10 years, and not a lot of people know that. They've got old, sometimes 20 and 30-year-old detectors in these houses that need upgrading. I don't know. Just an idea.
Yeah, and it's and one of the neat things too about using that real estate section in the Sunday paper is oftentimes they'll have the builders where they'll have a picture of the outside of the house, and then in that same ad or whatever on that same page there'll be a layout of the interior, and so you can kind of quiz your guys on, all right, what do you think the layout of this is going to be, and then you just look further down the page and there's the layout and you see if you were right or not. So it's a really good opportunity to practice some building reading. And it's cheap, and you can do it around a kitchen table.
And in those low-end neighborhoods like I live in, if you look at the layouts, all the builder does is he flips it over, puts the garage on the other side for the next house. You know what I mean? So they're not all that different.
Right. You only have to know 3 building styles, and you know the whole neighborhood, right?
That's exact. Well, in my neighborhood, you just need to know one trailer park layout, and you've got it.
Nice. Well, I'll tell you one thing that we do in our district, in our company, is I put out a monthly training list of what they're going to do each week, and we average 2 tours per week. But we've got building inspections, we've got pre-planning that we're supposed to be out on, and obviously our training. The company I run in is part of a SOC, so we are part of some special ops training that has to get done on a monthly basis minimum as well. So we break it into the 4 weeks for the most part. And I don't know if you can kind of see it, but we have a document that goes out and gets posted every month. And week 1 we do engine, week 2 we do rapid intervention, week 3 we do some truck stuff. Even though we're an engine, there's places we go that we're doing written, we're doing truck work. And then on week 4 we leave it open for our SOC work. So it's just, the guys know what's there, what they're going to need to do, and it works for us. And we can deviate from it, need be. If guys got too busy and it's fire prevention week, good example. Guys can't get it done today. Well, then the next tour they're going to get it done. And it seems to work for us. Finding the topics and prioritizing those sometimes gets to be a little juggling act. So Steve's having some technical issues. So when he wants to jump back in, he can try. But Bill, let's go back to the volunteer side of that. How would you look at that? How would we say, we need to do engine this month, or we need to do truck, or rural water operations, or something of that nature? Is there a way in which you would recommend volunteer companies look to do that?
Well, I gotta say I was pretty blessed with a partner as an officer over at Hyattsville Fire Department that when we did our duty shift program, each duty shift had a weeknight and then they had a weekend groups. And what we did was on our shift, the officer and I, we decided that hey, we want to be proactive with our drills, and so we created a schedule similar to what you have. But what we did was like week one was engine work, our engine subjects. Week two was truck subjects. Week three was rescue subjects, and then week four was we just called it a company drill because typically we usually ended up having two crews on our duty shift, so we could either staff the engine and the truck, or the engine and the squad, or the engine and special services. And then between the other officer and I, and some of the live-in officers in the program, we randomly picked our subjects based upon our own interests collectively. We discussed, hey, well, we want to look at this week or this month. Again, also some things, if there was a fire in the battalion or a fire in a neighboring battalion that we heard, all the comments about, we decide, hey, we want to look at that ourselves as well. And then also one thing we did too was we had a bit of like a rainy day schedule in each week also. Our first goal was obviously to get out on the street and get in our first due, but if the weather was too bad for us to do that, or if staffing was just small for us right at that moment that we couldn't afford to go out on the air, like we wanted to, what would we do inside? What subject would we cover inside? And that worked out really well for us. We ended up getting a lot of interest, and it was a big benefit also to the members because it gave them some ownership and some buy-in, because it wasn't just the officers talking about, hey, this is what we're going to do this week, next week, and so forth. It was like, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. What do you want to do? And it just continued to snowball from there.
Brad?
No, I just was going to add on to something that Bill said. Don't underestimate the importance of that inside stuff as well. I mean, you can do some of the best training in the business is just sitting around the coffee table, right? As we always all talk about. And one of the things that we like to do is just go over, we'll go over a NIOSH report, just sitting over a cup of coffee, talk about it, look through the diagrams, and then that is the catalyst for 20 or 30 minutes of conversation after that. A NIOSH report or a near miss report or something like that as a starting point, and then 30 minutes of conversation about tactical operations and safety and various other things just around the kitchen table. And so there's a tremendous value in training that's, everything doesn't have to be hands-on and out pulling hose. Don't underestimate the importance of just sitting around and talking with the troops over a cup of coffee, having started with a NIOSH report.
And it's the half hour, so I'll make a quick commercial break here. This is the Instructor Show. It's the first Wednesday of the month with your hosts Brad French and Steve Pegram. Our ombudsman, Bill Carey. I'm Bobby Halton from Fire Engineering. I'm dropping in this week just to say hi, and we're talking about everything training. Also, we'd like to remind you that the Instructor Society is having a conference this month on the 16th and 17th. If you go to the Instructor Society webpage, you can sign up. There's still some spots available, and really hone your instructional skills. It's a wonderful opportunity. If you have a question for anybody on here, just do hashtag FUTalk. We are monitoring that hashtag, so we'll get your question on air. I'm keeping an eye on the Twitter feed here. So if you want to have somebody ask a question of one of the people on the show today, that's hashtag FETalk. And I'll throw out something to the group that we do with my volunteer companies is, as a matter of fact, a shameless plug. Tomorrow, Joe Prenesti is doing a great webcast on Main Street fires. And almost every community in America, I would say 99.9% of the fire departments in America, have some version of Main Street. And Joe is dedicated his life's study to Main Street fires and Main Street issues, and he has a tremendous program and a great webcast. And what we do is we go back to the archives and for training on a Saturday, or especially in inclement weather, if we can't do hands-on, we'll throw up a webcast there, and then we'll sit down and talk about what the webcast had on that that we can make directly applicable to what we're doing at the Limestone Fire Protection District here in Owasso, Oklahoma, and how it helps us make a difference. So we utilize the webcasts, the radio shows, the Hangouts. We utilize all the digital stuff. Even the training minutes are very helpful for us as a resource for our training needs as a volunteer fire company.
That's a great point, Bobby. So I've been using the training minutes more and more, just with stuff that we're doing around here, because you're getting a wide variety of instructors who are so knowledgeable in what they're doing, and the guys learn by doing. But if they can watch Mike Champo, or they can watch Ray, or they can watch some of the extrication guys, show them how to do a certain maneuver. They see it on video, then we can go out in the engine room or out in the parking lot or in acquired and work on that. It really reinforces what we're doing. And so the training minutes are a really valuable asset. And then as of course as webcasts and things of that nature. So I think that's a huge asset for us. One of the questions when we talked about this was, how do we prioritize? How do we, once we're beyond our NFPA requirements, our state requirements, our OSHA requirements, how do we prioritize what we're going to do? So as a company officer, what would we say? How do I know I should work on this month and this next month and so on and down the line? So any comments on that?
Well, just to kind of reiterate what we kind of touched on with this earlier. To me, it's really it's driven by the first two district. It's driven by what and driven by your specific equipment. The level of familiarity that you have with your equipment, taking it beyond just knowing the basics and knowing the specifications of your equipment and things like that, and actually going out and knowing it takes X number of seconds, to dump your water tank through the deck gun, and exactly how much time you're going to have, and not just theoretical calculations and things like that, but going out and truly knowing the ins and outs of the apparatus and every single thing about that apparatus and troubleshooting and all that kind of stuff. And so, again, as far as prioritizing goes, I think it's just based upon what apparatus you have in your company and what needs the what needs the most training based upon the performance of your folks, at whether that be at incidents or whatever the case may be, or previous drills, things that you need to continue to work on and refresh on, and just driven a lot for me by the primary hazards of your first due district, whether you're in the career service and have a relatively narrow first due running area, or in the volunteer fire service and have to cover everything east to west, north to south within that particular political jurisdiction. It's just very much based on what you got.
And that makes total sense. What's in our first due? What are we facing? What's our daily obstacles for the most part? Steve's still cutting out, but he's sending me some messages. And one of the things that he puts in here is that we should talk about is Coleraine Township in Ohio had a double line of duty day. And they were using a reserve engine that day. And when you read the report on it, it was a contributing factor. So one of Steve's questions is, how do we address training operators and so forth running on a spare piece? And I think that's a really good question. So and that's both in the career and the volunteer service we've done that. Some of the points that are out there would be, different cab styles, open cab versus not, different radio headset, different hose loads, equipment, etc., different pump ops, things of that nature.
This is probably more of an operational piece instead of a training piece, but one of the issues that I was having a discussion with one of the guys in my department the other day about is when we switch to a reserve apparatus, we go with the SCBA units that are already on that apparatus. And so when it comes when it would come time for, heaven forbid, a Mayday or situation or something like that, and we're utilizing the pack tracker, that's going to pop up as a different apparatus on that pack tracker than what that person is actually assigned to. And so, again, that's more of an operational issue than a training issue. But anytime you're switching to reserve apparatus, we pull the engine out every morning and run it regardless. But especially if we're going to be running a reserve apparatus, my operator will pull it out and really go through the paces with it in the morning. We'll go out, review the the manual overrides and for various valves and stuff like that, things that we're not quite as familiar with, just typically first thing in the morning that day when we do have that apparatus. I don't know that you can, it seems a little difficult to justify spending a whole lot of training going around to different stations and learning a whole lot about different apparatus that aren't your regularly assigned apparatus, because you kind of got your basket full with the training you want to complete at your company level. But if nothing else, first thing in the morning, really spending an hour or two going through every nook and cranny of that apparatus so you're ready for it for that day. But that's a very, very good point of discussion, and there are certainly some operational issues and training issues with switching to reserve stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Steve. It threw up a red flag in my face right away. Here at work, our reserve, we're actually selling it this weekend. It's going away, but one of our reserve is a 95 Seagrave engine, and its capabilities are so much different than the 2005 that I'm riding on today. But that was one point. But the other point was, as a volunteer officer, when I was chief in New Egypt, in 1998, we bought a new engine, and that replaced the 66 Ward de France, which was a 5-speed, 1,000 GPM, the whole old school rig. But yet, when that 98 had to go out for service, 66 got put back in service. And you want to talk about a difference between an automatic transmission and back to that 5-speed non-synchronized, 1,000-gallon-a-minute pump with 750 water, and then we had already gotten used to the 98, 1,500-gallon-a-minute, 1,000 gallons of water. So that is really a great point, because that 250 gallons of water alone might make a difference. That could be the difference between a line of duty death report and not having one. So I like that you brought that up. It's a tremendous point. Tremendous point. Bill, anything to jump in with that?
Well, in my experience, we were pretty blessed to have operating on the volunteer side 2-piece engine companies, a wagon and pumper. Now, while they might not have at each house already operated in that way as far as being due, the volunteer side, the career staff in those houses did have consistently 2 apparatus, 2 engines available. So they were either regularly switching them out from engine and pumper each month, or if one was out of service, they already had a reserve in a sense that they were familiar with. The same applied when you had a county piece come over as a reserve. You checked it out and everything, and all that was done over with the officers and the operators before the piece ever went into service. And if there was problems, well, those were noted right away.
Excellent.
Something, Aaron, something that Bill just said that kind of sparked a thought in my mind as far as additional training ideas that are important. Don't focus entirely upon your own jurisdiction or even own department, period. When it comes to, we were discussing the RIT issues and stuff like that. What are the SCBA units of your surrounding jurisdictions? Are you going to be running a RIT assignment into another city, or is another city going to be running a RIT assignment into you that has a different style of SCBA? And and so when it comes to training opportunities as far as safety stuff goes, and particularly along the lines of the RIT environment, recognizing that across jurisdictional boundaries, if you've got differing types of equipment, that's certainly a great reason to do some training with those folks and to try to get your folks familiar with their stuff and back and forth. Because again, when it would come to a RIT deployment or something operational like that, whether it be, like I said, reserve equipment issues or mutual aid issues or whatever, thinking outside the box a little bit, particularly on the topic of rapid intervention training.
Absolutely, it makes total sense. One of the other things that Steve has asked me to bring up is, in your departments or state, that ISO is still a concern for prioritizing training. Are we tracking our training day, night, company, etc.? And are we following those ISO guidelines that we know that we're going to look at later, when it's time to get the next rating? So I can tell you that's something that we do consider here. We're probably not as good at it as we should be, simply because of time and some of the resources. But how's that working in other places? How is that being done around the country? Are people still looking at ISO? Are they still concerned about it?
The one of the things that, as far as Steve's question and comments about the night drills, we do through our rookie school when we have a recruit academy in. We always spend a week towards the end of the academy doing kind of scenario-based stuff, and you know the learning is over and it's time for the performance aspect, and we call it night fires. You know, no fancy name, but we call it night fires, and we just run nighttime drills into the wee hours of the morning all week long. But that's at the drill school at the academy level. They in our organization they just changed it up to where we're doing our basic skills operations this year at nighttime. Now it's in a high rise, so that the time of day doesn't really matter quite as much. We're kind of doing it at nighttime as a result of the fact that the building is empty during the nighttime hours, and we have it available to use. But I think that's where he was going with that question, was specifically with night training versus training during the day sometimes, and the additional challenges that you can have with those kind of operations. So we address it primarily in drill school and occasionally, but we don't do a whole lot of company level drills in the evening time, unless it's something that just kind of comes upon us. If we're out leaving a medic run and we want to do a quick hose stretch estimate or something like that, whether it's day, whether it's night, whatever, we'll do that.
You know,
I know in our region, volunteer companies continue to drill at night, but then they'll do Saturday or Sunday drills also, so they can expect it. So night with us.
caught a lot of feedback on that. Well, we reset here for a second. I don't know if Shannon, if you're still listening, I don't know why we're getting so much feedback, but on the production side, at least on my end, I am. If we look at the ISO and what they've done over the last few years with them, they've completely redesigned all the criteria and what they recommend, and they've done a really wonderful job. If you haven't been following the ISO, or if you stopped, I highly recommend you go back and take a look. Extremely beneficial. Whether or not your jurisdiction uses it or requires you to, it can be very beneficial. And if your jurisdiction does require you to, makes a tremendous difference for your insurance rates if it's clearly used as a marker in that regard. It can make a significant difference in what, especially your commercial users, are paying on their insurance rates.
Bobby, I think we lost Aaron, and I think maybe we've lost Steve as well. I guess we can just kind of keep the ball rolling, keep the ball rolling here until one of them can tag back in. Maybe we can discuss a little bit who's conducting the training. Is that something that always needs to be done by a training officer or by a designated instructor, or do you what are your thoughts on empowering other members and kind of putting them in charge of drill night? Like, hey, you know, next week we're going to talk about this, and you're doing it. And that kind of not only empowers them and gives them a little bit more buy-in, but then obviously gets them familiar with that topic, and then they turn around and teach it. So, what about who needs to be doing the teaching in each scenario, and empowering others to kind of get involved? What are your thoughts?
Well, from my experience, you know, having been a training officer and a career firefighter for over 30 years and a volunteer firefighter now, I think it's always great, as Brad, as you just said, to ask members in the organization to pick a topic and train on it. And it's even sometimes more beneficial to assign a topic to someone, give them the time and the tools and the reference material to do their homework on it, so that they can do a great job. I mean, help them ensure their success. But there's an old saying, and I don't know where it came from, so I apologize, I can't attribute it. But the saying goes, there's nothing better to help you learn a topic than to have to teach a topic. So, you know, if you have newer members and you can assign like a SCBA awareness or a quick connect drill, or if you can assign ladder throws, or if you can assign hydrant hookup to someone, it doesn't have to be War and Peace, but it's just something that everybody should drill on regularly. The valve hookup or whatever you use routinely. really, really important stuff. And I also wanted to comment, you made a great comment earlier, Brad, about interoperability, which is a term we don't use enough, I don't think, in terms of uh, our responses locally and regionally. We did a webcast last week, and we were talking about the rescue air systems, or called firefighter air supply systems, or FARS. Firefighter, they're, they're basically standpipes for air, which I think is long overdue in our construction, our codes, and our buildings, especially our complicated buildings, our large complicated buildings, our malls and such. There it becomes very critical that the people have the right hookups so that the firefighters can resupply their air packs on those particular buildings. So great point on understanding, what equipment the other departments may be bringing, and not just your air packs. There are jurisdictions where people are using different sized hose thread. Uh, there are jurisdictions where they have different accountability systems and tracking systems, and yet they're mutual aiding. That was the whole idea behind the genesis of the Blue Card project. It really grew out of a fire that occurred in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that I was the deputy chief of operations on, where we had to bring in people from all over the state. And the genesis behind Blue Card was to provide really regional certification and interoperability to call back members and have that interoperability within a jurisdiction or a mutual aid area, if you will, but to expand that mutual aid area to not just your adjacent neighbors, but beyond your adjacent neighbors into like a regional concept. So that was the thought process I had behind my Blue Card idea. And I think what the Brunacinis have done is just amazing with the curriculum. Now there's a curriculum you can share to kind of bring people together. But the goal was, as Brad said, was to ensure that interoperability element existed not only in certification and training. So if you're doing the Blue Card training, make sure that you take it to that next step and do the accessibility issue. In other words, being able to call those people back without having to have an act of Congress to do it. You know what I mean? Not having to go to the governor or the state or some protracted bureaucratic nightmare. Just be able to call them back or call them in to assist you when you need them and make sure that they're interoperable. But yeah, I think your original thought, Brad, about assigning different training topics to different people, especially if you have somebody with tremendous expertise in a particular area, like say online learning, or you have a default hydraulics expert or a default tactical expert in your organization. Boy, utilize them and share them with the other organizations.
Yeah, I think I'm back. Sorry about that. We lost internet here in the firehouse somehow. I think we have just too many guys using it at once. But Brad, I agree with that. That is excellent. Where I am, one of the guys is a really, really good heavy-duty tow operator. So when we're doing extrication things, there's a lot of times we let him take the lead because he knows far more about it than others will. So that kind of empowerment is huge. Bill, you have some things to dip into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, in my experience, which was what we were able to benefit from was the fact that in Prince George's County and also in the DC area, we had some of our volunteer members who worked career downtown, or they worked career in Fairfax or Alexandria. So what happened is they're bringing back from their experiences on their paid job what they're learning, and it usually starts off with hey, the other day we were out and we did this, and talk about it. Or someone would say, hey, I was detailed to truck so and so, and the officer took us out and we did that. Let me show you what we did. That's been good too, because when you're in a setting or a dry spell and you're kind of relying off the experience of the members that are there, that kind of dries a little bit too. And then you have somebody coming in and saying, hey, the other week, on platoon 2, we just ran this really good fire, but we noticed this different thing about construction. Let me talk about it. that's been great. It spurs, again, like you guys were talking about, it spurs that personal investment, that ownership, a bit of pride, which is a bad thing, a small dose, and it encourages others also to figure out in that same setting, or maybe they recall something in the past that they can participate in and involve themselves with.
Well, and I think that goes back to there's a few things. We have such dynamic organization, and we have such type A personalities that so many of our guys, whether they hold rank or they don't hold rank, have a lot to offer to the job. And we'd be foolish not to encourage that and utilize it, really exploit it to the best of the department. Sometimes our egos get in the way, training officers' egos get in the way, or I'm the chief.
No, the fire service egos.
Yeah, I know. Who would think? How about who would think?
Oh, go on. Oh, go on. You're kidding.
What was I thinking? But and then that paralyzes us at times, and it's so important to do that, and being open to these things gives us the opportunity to go back and prioritize what's going on. And,
Aaron, on that point, at FDIC, we actually had to widen the doors so that Rick Lasky and I could walk through the doors at the same time because our heads are so big.
I thought it was just because you were tall, Bobby. I thought it was your height.
Oh, no, it's my inflated ego.
And when it comes time when you're talking about empowering people, I think the stage in the career in which you try to push that empowerment and that involvement is important as well. I mean, better to get a guy on the track of really being into the job for their whole career than to give that empowerment to them, to get them involved in that training aspect as early on as possible when you can in their career. I mean, obviously there are some boundaries. You don't want a one-year guy teaching some complex topic and things like that. I mean, you have to apply a little common sense. But empowerment at an early stage in their career is going to be one of those things that's really going to set somebody to not just, as the joke goes, not just be an employee of the fire department, but be a firefighter, as somebody that's really into the job. And starting them out with some of that empowerment early on and planting that seed early is going to have a lot of dividends down the road, I think.
I firmly agree. And I see it again, I see it in both the career and the volunteer side, because the volunteers have such a tough time with retention. We're recruiting and retaining, and we're giving grants for all this. Once we've recruited them, sometimes the retention isn't necessarily that they don't like being a fireman. They don't like being maybe pigeonholed, or they don't like being treated certain ways. And we all understand how that goes, and that they start losing interest. Well, give them some buy-in. If the guy is a farmer, and he can teach you about farm machinery, how we would take it apart, a man in the machine type of thing, utilize the guy. The other thing that I found is when I was a volunteer chief, I was very young, just like Steve. We were about the same age, and there was no way either of us probably had any business being chief that young, but somebody had to do it. And but what I found was I was running every drill for a while because I thought I was supposed to do that. And then what I did notice, and I realized, and some older guys said to me, is they're turning you off, man. They're tired of your voice. But you have to get different people in there doing it. You absolutely have to get somebody else. They need that other voice. And even in my own department, where I could do a lot of this training, I prefer to bring in a guy from another company from around me. Hey, why don't you talk about some truck stuff, or why don't you talk about a little bit of RIT stuff for my guys? And I think they tend to appreciate that.
And what to dovetail on Aaron's comments right there too, and Brad's, when you ask somebody to teach something, everybody. There's certain basic primal needs that we have, and there's nothing wrong with that. And everybody craves recognition. And it doesn't have to be for major stuff. Just an occasional thank you, an occasional great job goes a long way. And what Brad's talking about, sometimes when you ask somebody to do something, it's recognizing that person's value, and which is really, really important. And it's a fundamental principle of firefighters. We recognize the importance of human life above all else. And I think in conjunction with that, we have to recognize the value that people bring. And as Brad and Aaron just so eloquently said, by getting them to do some training at the weekly meeting or the monthly get together, that does a lot to recognize them, and I think that's a neat thing, and I think if it's done right, as Brad and Aaron just laid out for us, it can really make a difference in helping somebody feel more connected to the organization and the mission. And I think it also validates that for a lot of us, we really love what we do. And there's almost a mentality in society today that work is a four-letter word. And if you're a firefighter, it's not. It's equivalent to love, not to it's we love what we do, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay to really be excited about the fire service. Somebody once tried to insult me by calling me a cheerleader for the fire service, and I want it on my tombstone. I mean, I thought it was the greatest compliment I ever got.
That's excellent. Well, we're getting towards the end, fellas. So do we have some final comments, and we want to leave everybody with our points on this. So, Bill.
Well, staying with the subject, the tool by IFSI, the assessment, that's a great tool that departments can use. Also, don't be afraid to go back to your own state association, your own county, your cities, your basics. We can go on about training on and on and on and incorporate all the topics and all the basics and everything, but you're not gonna make any improvements unless you can identify the problems in your companies or in your shift or in your department itself and start to work on those. So it takes being a bit honest among yourselves as officers, as firefighters, as shifts, as the department as a whole, and saying, hey, it looks like we got some problems here. What can we do to fix those? What can we do to maybe relearn some of the basics that we keep talking about that you go back to, and moving forward from there.
Chief?
Me? Oh.
Yeah.
I think Bill is right. I think that, as we uncover different issues or whatever in our organizations, it gives us an opportunity to do training on it. And lots of times, just because one person has a problem with something doesn't mean that 4 or 5 or 6 of us don't have the same shortcoming. I was never very talented with ropes and my knots. And I always appreciated it when people would come and do rope classes, knot classes, and because it always helped me get better. And I always struggled with it. And there were always folks coming up with new and better and more clever ways to teach it. So I always appreciated those classes, and they always helped me. They were always really beneficial. They still are today. And I don't know what it is. How some people just have a block for certain aspects of what we do. For me, it was always my knots. I don't know why. Was never very good with my knots. But so when you uncover something like that, if you have a guy or a gal like me in your crew, and he says, "Boy, I'm struggling with my knots," have somebody else come in and put class on it. They may not be. I clearly would not be the person to ask to do that training, but clearly I would benefit from it. So I think Bill made a great point. Always look for opportunities in your organizations to be better. I think that relentless pursuit of perfection that we all have as firefighters is a great trait. And just before I close out, I just want to say thank you to Bill for agreeing to be our new producer and ombudsman. And I can tell just by how much value he added today, it's going to be a great addition to the program. And thank you to Brad French for agreeing to join in as a weekly host on this show with Aaron and Steve on the instructor show. That's outstanding, and so thank you for doing that. And everybody, remember Citi Field this Saturday if you're in the New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Long Island area. We're really, really, really hoping to have 1,500 folks be able to make it out to Citi Field. So I'll shut up now and thank you.
Brad, any final thoughts?
Just very briefly, first of all, thanks to Aaron and Steve and Bobby for considering bringing me on for the show. I've had a good time today and look forward to being involved in some more down the road for sure. The last thing I would leave as far as company level training goes is, and I kind of brought this up earlier and I'll reiterate just a little bit, training by walking around, parking the fire apparatus and walk around, whether that be a particular target hazard in your first due district, whether that be going and parking in the middle of a new housing development that has houses in varying levels of construction and completion, and you can kind of see a house being built in the span of a 20-minute walk just by going into 3 or 4 different partially done places. And just get out, get off the couch, go park the apparatus somewhere and just get out and walk around. You'd be surprised at how much you can learn about your first due district, and it's crew camaraderie, and you have fun at the same time. So I'm a big fan. We do it every shift at my station. Just get out and walk around.
Excellent, excellent. Well, again, I think we've had a great day. It's only an hour, which we can fill up an hour so darn fast. We can fill up a day so darn fast. My last thought on this is quite simple. If you go back and you look at some of the founding premises of schools, one of the things was we never cared about rank structure. You were a chief or you were a probie. We treated you all the same. And now, granted, when we get in the firehouse, that's not necessarily going to be the case. But when it comes to training, I think we need to realize that we all bring something new to the table. We all bring a perspective of what we need and what we yearn for in training to the table. And I think that that's something that, from probie all the way up to the top of the pyramid, we really need to keep in mind. And so prioritizing our training depends on all of us, not just what the brass want or just what the tail on the dog wants. And I really appreciate the opportunity again to do this. We've come to the end of our show, and I welcome Brad on. It's great. We've got another dynamic speaker involved in this, and somebody who's going to add a lot to these hangouts. And Bill, thanks so much. This is just outstanding that we're expanding these things. And we have the opportunity to reach so many thousands of people through Penwell and Fire Engineering and FDIC that, it's just a blessing for Steve and I to be a part of this. I know he can't get his connection squared away, but we know that listening to him speak fills us with insight. So I think we've run out of our time for the day, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'd like to tell everybody have a great day and enjoy it. Thanks a lot.